Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Happy Thursday. It's my favorite day of the week for many reasons. One of them being I stream on Thursdays. So let me just get this mic a little closer to my face so y'all can hear me. But today we are jumping into our second stream for Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I have a little bit of a better setup for today's stream. I have the book facing me. It's going to be a good one. And I'm excited to jump back in. I just went ahead and kind of read a bit of a plot summary of the first 8 chapters that we read in the last stream. So I feel basically caught up at this point, but I am going to go ahead and read the last paragraph before I jump into this new section just to refresh my memory. But yeah, let's get into it. Okay. Elizabeth joined them again, only to say that her sister was worse and that she could not leave her. Bingley urged Mr. Jones being sent for immediately, while his sisters, convinced that no country advice could be of service, recommended an express to town for one of the most eminent physicians. This she would not hear of, but she was not so unwilling to comply with her brother's proposal, and it was settled that Mr. Jones should be sent for early in the morning if Miss Bennet were not decidedly better. Bingley was quite uncomfortable. His sisters declared that they were miserable. They solaced their wretchedness, however, by duets after supper, while he could find no better relief to his feelings than by giving his housekeeper directions that every possible attention might be paid for to the sick lady and his sisters. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move this over. That's much better. Okay. Okay. And without further ado, let's get into chapter 9 of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Chapter 9. Elizabeth passed the chief of the night in her sister's room, and in the morning had the pleasure of being able to spend a tolerable answer to the enquiries which she very eagerly received from Mr. Bingley by a housemaid, and some time afterwards from the two elegant ladies who waited on his sisters. In spite of this amusement, however, she requested to have a note sent to Longbourn, desiring her mother to visit Jane, and from her own judgment of the situation, and form her own judgment of the situation. The note was immediately dispatched, and its contents as quickly compiled with. Mrs. Bennet, accompanied by her two youngest girls, reached Netherfield soon after the family breakfast. Had she found Jane in any apparent danger, Mrs. Bennet would have been miserable, but being satisfied on only seeing her that her illness was not alarming, she had no wish of recovering immediately, as her restoration to health would probably remove her from Netherfield. She would not listen, therefore, to her daughter's proposal of being carried home, neither did the apothecary, who arrived about the same time, think it all advisable. After sitting a little while with Jane, Miss Bingley's appearance on Miss Bingley's appearance and invitation, the mother and three daughters all attended her into the breakfast parlor. Bingley met them with hopes that Miss Bennet had not found that Mrs. Bennet had not found Miss Bennet worse than expected. Move this up a little bit so I can see better. Okay. Indeed, I have, sir, was her answer. She was a great deal too ill to be moved. Mr. Jones says we must not think of moving her. We must trespass a little longer on your kindness. Removal, cried Bingley. I must not be thought of. My sister, I am sure, will not hear of her removal. So they're speaking about Jane. Okay. May you depend upon it, madam, said Miss Bingley, with cold civility, that Miss Bennet shall receive every possible attention while she remains with us. Mrs. Bennet was profuse in her acknowledgments. I am sure, she added, if it was not for such good friends, I do not know what would become of her, for she is very ill indeed, and suffers a vast deal, though with the greatest patience of the world, which is always the way with her, for she has, without expectation, the sweetest temper I ever met with. I often tell my other girls that they are nothing to her. You have a sweet room here, Mr. Bingley, and a charming prospect over that gravel walk. I do not know a place in the country that is equal to Netherfield. You will not think of quitting in such a hurry, I hope, though you have but a short lease. Whatever I do, it is done in a hurry, replied he, and therefore I should resolve to quit Netherfield. I should probably be off in 5 minutes. At present, however, I consider myself as quite fixed here. That is exactly what I should have supposed of you, said Elizabeth. You begin to comprehend me, do you? Cried he, turning towards her. Oh, yes, I understand you perfectly. I wish I might take this for a compliment, but to be so easily seen through, I'm afraid, is pitiful. That is as it happens. It does not necessarily follow that a deep, intricate character is more or less estimable than such a one as yours. Lizzie, cried her mother, remember where you are, and do not run on in the wild manner that you are suffered due to at home. I did not know before, continued Bingley immediately, that you are a studier of character. It must be an amusing study. Yes, but intricate characters are the most amusing. They have at least the advantage. The country, said Darcy, can in general supply but few subjects for such a study. In a country neighborhood, you move in a very confined and unvarying society. But people themselves alter so much that there is something new to be observed in them forever. Yes, indeed, cried Mrs. Bennet, offended by his manner of mentioning a country neighborhood. I assure you that there is quite as much of that going on in the country as in town. Everybody was surprised, and Darcy, after looking at her for a moment, turned silently away. Mrs. Bennet, who fancied she had gained a complete victory over him, continued her triumph. I cannot see that London has any great advantage over the country for my part, except the shops and public places. The country is a vast deal pleasanter, is it not, Mr. Bingley? When I am in the country, he replied, I never wish to leave it, and when I am in the town, it is pretty much the same. They have their advantages, and I can quite equally be happy in either. Aye, that is because you have the right disposition. But that gentleman, looking at Darcy, seemed to think the country was nothing at all. Indeed, ma'am, mamma, you are mistaken, said Elizabeth, blushing for her mother. You quite mistook Mr. Darcy. He only meant that there were not such a variety of people to be met with in the country as in town, which you must acknowledge to be true. Certainly, my dear. Nobody said that there were, but as to not meeting with many people. What's up, Alan? I'll hydrate for you, Alan. How you doing, man? How does life be lifin'? Okay. Certainly, my dear. Life be life. Want to hear some bullshit? Yeah, dude. I would love to. I want to turn on this little house I have behind me. I made this house. Well, it was an instructional thing, but my friend gave it to me, and this little potted plant outside the door never wants to be correctly positioned. But yeah, today was just a day. I had work. I did a writing stream this morning, which I haven't been doing many recently, and the only reason for that is because I typically try to do writing streams when I'm writing longhand, like in a notebook. And I just have been doing a lot of writing like on my computer and in front of a screen recently, so I don't feel as able to do live streams when I have to like use my computer because I use the same computer to stream as I do to type. Um, turn on. Oh, there we go. Look at my little house. Oh, I guess you can't properly see it. First and foremost, no one's hurt. On Sunday, me and my partner were driving home at a red light. This absolute prick ass in his pickup with lifted wheels bumps me in the back left. Damn. When I pull over to assess the damage, the driver drives off. God damn it. That's horrible. That is messed up. I am so sorry to hear that. I've been in that situation where I was the one to hit someone and I like stayed like pulled over and like took responsibility for my actions like an adult. And I hate when people don't do that because it's just easier to let insurance handle it for both of you. Um, no more than a scuff. Okay, that's good. Yeah, usually if it's paint transfer, it can usually just get fixed with like honestly just detailing at home. Like luckily it's like a $20 fix usually. Um, but damn, I'm so sorry that happened. That sucks. Ugh, Billy, man. Were you turning left or were you turning right? This is my question. Because I feel like these issues always happen with left turns. And this is why I take a vow to only take right turns for the rest of my life. Um, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Alan. And I hope that I'm glad to hear it's only a scuff, and I hope that you're able to fix your car and that there was no internal damage. I'm glad everyone is safe. But god damn it, I hate that for you. I'm so sorry. People should take accountability for their actions. Anyway, certainly, my dear, nobody said there were, but as to not meeting with many people in this neighborhood, I believe there are few neighborhoods larger. I know we dine with 24 families. I was leaving a residential street, about to turn left. Okay. Damn. So did this person just like come out of nowhere? Because you weren't even turning. Nothing but concern for Elizabeth could enable Bingley to keep his countenance. His sister was less delicate, and directed her eye toward Mr. Darcy with a very expressive smile. Elizabeth, for the sake of saying something that might turn her mother's thoughts, now asked her if Charlotte Lucas had been at Longbourn since her coming away. Yes, she called yesterday with her father. What an agreeable man Sir William is, Mr. Bingley, is he not? Is not he? So much of the man of fashion, so genteel and so easy. He has always something to say to everybody. That is my idea of good breeding, and those persons who fancy themselves very important and never open their mouths quite mistake the matter. No, wait, I was aiming to turn right. This schmuck was either also going right or going forward. Oh, okay, I understand. It is worse than I thought. God damn it. Oh well, I hope that it's an easy fix. You wish many inconveniences upon him. Fair. Did Charlotte dine with you? No, she would go home. I fancy she was wanted about the mince pies. For my part, Mr. Bingley, I always keep servants that they can do their own work. My daughters are brought up differently. But everybody is to judge for themselves, and the Lucases are very good sort of girls, I assure you. It is a pity that they are not handsome. Not that I think Charlotte is so very plain, but then she is our particular friend. I like how they use the word handsome to describe women. Um, it's funny, like the way with etymology words come in and out of like their definitions, and like it's become such a male-oriented word. But I like being called handsome. But maybe that's just me tipping the non-binary scale. Um, like I want him to shit himself in traffic. Okay. Fair. Like something that is annoying, but not something that's detrimental to your life. Like shitting yourself in traffic. That would suck. Have never done that. That would be bad. Um, Finish that final girl support group. I liked it. Today I started Requiem for a Dream. Holy shit, it's physically a hard read. Oh no. Like in a way that there are a lot of big words that are confusing, or is it just really old? Um, or yeah, in what way is it physically a hard read? Is the book very heavy and you can't hold it? That's the case with this book. That's why we have her set up on a table. And I have a little yoga block down here to hold it. She seems a very pleasant young woman, said Bingley. Oh, dear, yes, but you must own she is very plain. Lady Lucas herself has often said so, and envied me Jane's beauty. I do not like to boast of my own child, but to be sure, Jane, one does not often see anybody better looking. It is what everybody says. I do not trust my own partiality. When she was only 15, there was a gentleman at my brother Gardner's town so much in love with her that my sister-in-law was sure he would make her an offer before he came away. But, however, he did not. Perhaps he thought her too young. However, he wrote some verses on her, and very pretty they were. Um, so I expect it to be a very upsetting book. If you've seen the movie, you'll know. But what I mean is there's no quotation marks for when characters talk. Oh no. Okay, so I haven't seen this movie, Requiem, Requiem for a Dream. Um, that is really annoying. And it's like a literary choice. I feel like I don't know when this book is from. I assume it's old. Much of the dialogue is accented and phonetic, so it's not that hard. Okay. So like maybe not what you're used to though, like out of your comfort zone. There was this one book I read, really, really good, Delicious Foods by James Hannaham, I think. It is such a good book, but the main character that we're following is like kind of illiterate, uneducated. And so there's no quotation marks there. And I always wondered if that was like a rhetorical choice to show even like prove even more that this character that we're kind of looking at is kind of illiterate because even the words on the paper are in a way that would be difficult to understand. And yeah, I thought that was a really cool choice. But I imagine reading it aloud is really difficult because how are you supposed to know like the changes in your vocality? Um, Written in the 70s, movie from 2000. Oh, cool, Jared Leto. Nice. Um, okay, but you just started that today. What do you think so far? I've never I think I saw the Pride and Prejudice movie one time, but I forget it because I wasn't really paying attention. And I think at the time I honestly didn't really care for it that much, but I would give it a chance now for sure. Um, okay. And so ended his affection, said Elizabeth impatiently. There has been many a one, I fancy, overcome in the same way. I wonder who first discovered the efficacy of poetry in driving away love. I have been used to consider poetry as the food of love, said Darcy. Of a fine, stout, healthy love it may. Everything nourishes what is strong already. But if it be only a slight, thin sort of inclination, I am convinced that one good sonnet will starve it entirely away. Um, the book, yeah, I'm having fun reading it because it takes place in New York, and in the movie Jared Leto and his character's mom really lean heavily into the Jewish slash New Yorker accent, and I have fun talking like that. Oh, hell yeah, dude. That sounds so fun. Hell yeah. Love that for you. Darcy only smiled, and the general pause which ensued made Elizabeth tremble lest her mother should be exposing herself again. She longed to speak, but could think of nothing to say, and after a short silence, Mrs. Bennet began repeating her thanks to Mr. Bingley for his kindness to Jane, with an apology for troubling him so with Lizzie. Miss Mr. Bingley was unaffectedly civil with his answer, and forced his younger sister to be civil also, and say what the occasion required. She performed her part indeed without much graciousness, but Mrs. Bennet was satisfied, and soon afterward ordered her carriage. Upon the signal, the youngest of her daughters put herself forward. The two girls had been whispering to each other during the whole visit, and the result of it was that the youngest should tax Mr. Bigley, and having promised on the first coming into his country to give a ball in Netherfield. On the other hand, another main character is a black person, black mane, named Tyrone, who speaks a little jive. I'm kind of doing that, but being careful. Yeah. Oh, okay, there you go. I was like, a black mane, a black man. Um, but because of what I said earlier, much of the time, I don't know who the fuck is talking. Yeah, fair. Um, well, that sounds fun. You have a lot to work with. Yeah, so far with this book so far, I find that like I feel like all the characters speak the same way in this very like aristocratic tone. And I'm like, y'all sound the same. How is anyone hearing me gonna be able to tell? But we'll see. Um cool. Lydia was a stout, well grown girl of 15, with a fine complexion and good humored countenance, a favorite with her mother, whose affection had brought her into public at an early age. She had high animal spirits and a sort of natural self consequence, which the attention of the officers to whom her uncle's good dinners and only easy manners recommended her had increased into assurance. She was very equal, therefore, to address Mr. Bingley on the subject of the ball, and abruptly remind him of his promise, adding that it would be the most shameful thing in the world if he did not keep it. His answer to this sudden attack was delightful to their mother's ear. I am perfectly ready, I assure you, to keep my engagement, and when your sister is recovered, you shall, if you please, name the very day of the ball, but you would not wish to be dancing while she is ill. Lydia declared herself satisfied. Oh, yes, it would be much better to wait till Jane was well, and by the time you most likely Captain Carter would be at Meryton again. And when you have given your ball, she added, I shall insist on their giving one also. I shall tell Colonel Forrester it will be quite a shame if he does not. Mrs. Bennet and her daughters then departed, and Elizabeth returned instantly to Jane, leaving her own and her relations' behaviour to the remarks of the two ladies and Mr. Darcy, the latter of whom, however, could not be prevailed on to join in their censure of her, in spite of all Miss Bingley's witticisms on fine eyes. I love the word witticisms. Wow. I'm going to start using that word. I recommended the movie, but it's very upsetting. A short synopsis. It follows four people who try to follow their dreams, and through drugs, their lives just get worse and worse. Witticisms, man. That sounds really intriguing though. Like, it does sound sad, but it also sounds like a very like a story that would keep you very interested. So I'm glad you're reading it. Hell yeah. Okay. Have fun lurking. Thanks for chatting for a little while, Alan. I will keep my witticisms about me. The day passed much as the day before had done. Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley had spent some hours in the morning with the invalid who continued through slowly to mend, and in the evening Elizabeth joined their party in the drawing room. The loo table, however, did not appear. Mr. Darcy was writing, and Miss Bingley, seated near him, was watching the process of his letter, and repeatedly calling off his attention by messages to his sister. Mr. Hurst and Mr. Bingley were at piquet, and Miss Hurst was observing their game. Piquet. Elizabeth took up some needlework, and was sufficiently amused in attending to what passed between Darcy and his companion. The perpetual commendations of the lady, either on his handwriting, or on the evenness of his lines, or on the length of his letter, with the perfect unconcern with which her praises were received, formed a curious dialogue, and was exactly in unison with her opinion of each. "How delighted Miss Darcy will be to receive such a letter!" He made no answer. "You write uncommonly fast." "You are mistaken. I write rather slowly." "How many letters you must have occasion to write in the course of a year! Letters of business, too! How odious I should think them!" "It is fortunate, then, that you should fall to my lot instead of yours." "Pray tell your sister that I long to see her." "I have already told her so once, by your desire." "I'm afraid I do not like your pen. Let me mend it for you. I mend pens remarkably well." "Thank you, but I can always mend my own." "How can you contrive to write so even?" He was silent. "Tell your sister I am delighted to hear of her improvement on the harp, and pray let her know that I am quite in raptures with her beautiful little design for a table. I think it infinitely superior to Miss Grangley's." "Will you give me leave to defer your raptures till I write again? At present I have not room to do them justice." "Oh, it is of no consequence. I shall see her in January, but do not always write such charming long letters. But do you always write such long, charming letters to her, Mr. Darcy?" "They are generally long, but whether always charming, it is not for me to determine. It is a rule with me that a person who can write a long letter with ease cannot write ill." "That will do for a compliment to Darcy, Caroline," cried her brother, "because he does not write with ease. He studies too much for words of 4 syllables. Do you not, Darcy?" My style of writing is very different from yours." "Oh," cried Miss Bingley, "Charles writes in the most careless way imaginable. He leaves out half of his words and blots the rest. My ideas flow so rapidly that I have not time to express them, by which means my letters sometimes convey no ideas at all to my correspondents." "Your humility, Mr. Bingley," said Elizabeth, "must disarm reproof." "Nothing is more deceitful," said Darcy, "than the appearance of humility. It is often only carelessness of opinion, and sometimes an indirect boast." "And which of the two do you call my little recent piece of modesty?" "The indirect boast, for you are really proud of your defects in writing, because you consider them as proceeding from a rapidity of thought and carelessness of execution, which, if not estimable, you think at least highly interesting. The power of doing anything with quickness is always much prized by the possessor, and often without any attention to the imperfection of the performance. When you told Mrs. Bennet this morning that if you ever resolved on quitting Netherfield that you have gone in 5 minutes, you mean it to be a sort of panegyric, of compliment to yourself, and yet what is there to be so laudable in the perceptance which must leave very necessary business undone, and can be of no real advantage to yourself or anyone else." "Nay," cried Bingley, "this is too much, to remember at night all the foolish things that were said here in the morning. And yet, upon my honour, I believe that I said of myself to be true, and I believed at this moment. At least, therefore, I did not assume the character of needless precipitance, merely to show off before the ladies." "I dare say you believed it, but I am by no means convinced that you would have gone with such celerity. Your conduct would be quite as dependent on chance as that of any man I know, and if, as you were mounting your horse, a friend were to say, 'Bingley, you had better stay till next week,' you would probably do it, and you would probably not go, and, at another word, might stay a month." "You have only proved by this," cried Elizabeth, "that Mr. Bingley did not do justice to his own disposition. You have shown off now much more than he did himself." "I am exceedingly gratified," said Bingley, "by your converting what my friend says into a compliment on the sweetness of my temper. But I am afraid you are giving it a turn which the gentleman did by no means intend, for he would certainly think the better of me if under such circumstance I were to give a flat denial and ride off as fast as I could." "Would Mr. Darcy then consider the rashness of your original intention as atoned by your obstinacy in adhering to it? Upon my word, I cannot exactly explain the matter. Darcy must speak for himself." "You expect me to account for opinions which you chose to call mine, but which I have never acknowledged. Allowing the case, however, to stand accordingly to your representation, you must remember, Miss Bennet, that the friend who is supposed to desire him returned to the house, and the delay of his plan, as merely desired it, asked it without offering one argument in favour of its prosperity. To yield readily, easily, to the persuasion of a friend is no merit with you. To yield without conviction is no complement of the understanding of you either. You appear to me, Mr. Darcy, to allow nothing for the influence of friendship and affection. A regard to the requester would often make one readily yield to a request, without waiting for arguments to reason one into it. I am not particularly speaking of such a case as you have supposed about Mr. Bingley. We may as well wait, perhaps, till the circumstance occurs, before we discuss the discretion of his behaviour thereupon. But in general and ordinary cases between friend and friend, where one of them is desired by the other to change a resolution of no great moment, should you think ill of that person for complying without the desire, without waiting to be argued into it? Will it not be advisable, before we proceed on this subject, to arrange with rather more precision the degree of importance which is to appertain to this request, as well as the degree of intimacy subsisting between the parties? "By all means," cried Bingley. "Let us hear all the particulars, not forgetting their comparative height and size, for that will have more weight in the argument, Miss Bennet, than you may be aware of. I assure you that if Darcy were not such a great tall fellow, in comparison with myself, I should not pay him half so much defence. I declare I do not know a more awful object than Darcy, on particular occasions and in particular places, at his own house especially, and of a Sunday evening, when he has nothing to do." Mr. Darcy smiled, but Elizabeth thought she could perceive that he was rather offended, and therefore checked her laugh. Miss Bingley warmly resented the uh, in- indignity he had received, and an expulsion with her brother for talking such nonsense. I see your design, Bingley, and his friend. You dislike an argument, and want to silence this. Perhaps I do. Arguments are too much like disputes. If you and Miss Bennet will defer yours till I am out of the room, I shall be very thankful, and then you may say whatever you like of me. What you ask, said Elizabeth, is no sacrifice on my side, and Mr. Darcy had much better finish his letter. Darcy took her advice, and did finish his letter. When that business was over, he applied to Miss Bingley and Elizabeth for the indulgence of some music. Miss Bingley moved with the uh, alacrity to the pianoforte, and after a polite request that Elizabeth would lead the way, which the other, as politely and more earnestly, negatived, she seated herself. Mrs. Hurst sang with her sister, and while they were thus employed, Elizabeth could not help observing that she turned over some music books that lay on the instrument. How frequently Mr. Darcy's eyes were fixed on her! She hardly knew how to suppose that she could be an object of admiration to not such a man, and yet he could look at her because he disliked her, was still more strange. She could not imagine, however, at last, that she could be an object of admiration to so great a man, yet he could not look at her because he disliked her, was still more strange. She could not imagine, however, at last, that she drew his notice because there was a something about her more wrong and reprehensible, according to his ideas of right, than in any other person present. The supposition did not pain her. She liked him too little to care for his approbation. After playing some Italian songs, Miss Bingley varied the charm by a lively Scotch air, and soon afterwards Mr. Darcy, drawing near Elizabeth, said to her, "Do you not feel a great inclination, Miss Bennet, to seize an opportunity of dancing a reel?" She smiled, but made no answer. He repeated the question, with some surprise at her silence. "Oh," said she, "I heard you before, but I could not immediately determine what to say in reply. You wanted me, I know, to say yes, that you might have the pleasure of uh, dispensing my taste. But I always delight in overthrowing these kind of schemes, and cheating a person of their premeditated contempt. I have therefore made up my mind to tell you that I do not want to dance a reel at all, and now despise me if you dare." "Indeed, I do not dare." Elizabeth, having rather expected to affront him, was amazed at his gallantry, but there was a mixture of sweetness and archness in her manner, which made it difficult for her to affront anybody, and Darcy had never been so bewitched by any woman that he was by her. He really believed that were it not for the inferiority of her connections, he should be in some danger. Miss Bingley saw, or suspected enough to be jealous, that her great anxiety for the recovery of her dear friend Jane received some assistance from her desire of getting rid of Elizabeth. She often tried to provoke Darcy into disliking her guest by talking of their supposed marriage and planning his happiness in such an alliance. "I hope," she said, and they were walking together in the shrubbery the next day, "you will give your mother-in-law a few hints when this desirable event takes place as to the advantage of holding her tongue. And if you can compass it, do cure the younger girls of running after the officers. And, if I may mention so delicate a subject, endeavor to check that little something bordering on conceit and impertinence which your lady possesses. Have you anything else to propose for my domestic felicity? Oh, yes. Do not let the portraits of your uncle and aunt Phillips be placed in the gallery at Pemberley. Put them next to your great uncle, the judge. They are of the same profession, you know, only in different lines. As for your Elizabeth's picture, you must not attempt to have it taken, for what painter could do justice to those beautiful eyes? It would not be easy, indeed, to catch their expression, but their color and shape and the eyelashes, so remarkably fine, might be copied. At that moment, they were met from another walk by Miss Hurst and Elizabeth herself. "I do not know that you intended to walk," said Miss Bingley, in some confusion, lest they had been overheard. "You used us abominably ill," answered Mrs. Hurst, "in running away without telling us that you were coming out." Then, taking the disenraged arm of Mr. Darcy, she left Elizabeth to walk by herself. The path just admitted three. Mr. Darcy felt their rudeness, and immediately said, "This walk is not wide enough for our party. We had better go into the avenue." But Elizabeth, who had not the least inclination to remain with them, laughingly answered, "No, no, stay where you are. You are charmingly grouped, and appear to uncommon advantage. The picturesque would be spoilt by admitting a fourth. Goodbye." And then she ran gaily off, rejoicing, as she rambled about, in the hope of being at home again in a day or two. Jane was already so much recovered as to intend leaving her room for a couple of hours that evening. All right, that was chapter 10. All right. A little stretchy stretch. I can see I'm dropping some frames, but hopefully not too many. All right. I'm going to continue forward. Chapter 11. When the ladies were moved after dinner, Elizabeth ran up to her sister, and, seeing her well guarded from cold, attended her into the drawing-room, where she was welcomed by her two friends with many professions of pleasure, and Elizabeth had never seen them so agreeable as they were during the hour which passed before the gentlemen appeared. Their powers of conversation were considerable. They could describe an entertainment with accuracy, relate an anecdote with humor, and laugh at their acquaintance with spirit. But when the gentlemen entered, Jane was no longer the first object. Miss Bingley's eyes were instantly turned toward Darcy, and had something to say to him before he had advanced many steps. He addressed himself directly to Miss Bennet, with a polite congratulation. Mr. Hurst also made a slight bow and said he was very glad, but diffuseness and warmth remained for Bingley's salutation. He was full of joy and attention. The first half hour was spent in piling up the fire, lest she should suffer from the change of room, and she removed at his desire on the other side of the fireplace, that she might be farther from the door. He then sat down by her, and talked scarcely to anyone else. Elizabeth, at work in the opposite corner, saw it all with great delight. When tea was over, Mr. Hurst reminded his sister-in-law of the card table, but in vain. She had obtained private intelligence that Mr. Darcy did not wish for cards, and Mr. Hurst soon found even his open petition rejected. She assured him that no one intended to play, and the silence of the whole party on the subject seemed to justify her. Mr. Hurst had therefore nothing to do but to stretch himself on one of the sofas and go to sleep. Darcy took up a book. Miss Bingley did the same, and Mrs. Hurst, principally occupied in playing with her bracelets and rings, joined now and then in the brothers' conversation with Miss Bennet. Miss Bingley's attention was quite as much engaged in watching Mr. Darcy's progress through his book as in reading her own, and she was perpetually either making some equity or looking at his page. Enquiry, or looking at his page. She could not win him, however, to any conversation. He merely answered her question and read on. At length, quite exhausted by the attempt to be amusing with her own book, which she had only chosen because it was the second volume of his, she gave a great yawn and said, "How pleasant it is to spend an evening in this way! I declare, after all, that there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than a book. When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library." No one made any reply. She then yawned again, threw aside her book, and cast her eyes round the room in quest of some amusement. When hearing her brother mentioned a ball to Miss Bennet, she turned suddenly toward him and said, "By the by, Charles, are you really serious in mediating a dance in Netherfield? I should advise you, before you determine on it, to consult the wishes of the present party. I am much mistaken if there are not some among us to whom a ball would be rather a punishment than a pleasure." "If you mean Darcy," cried her brother, "he may go to bed, if he chooses, before it begins, but as for the ball, it is quite a settled thing, and as soon as Nicholas has made white soup enough, I shall send round my cards." "I should like balls infinitely better," she replied, "if they were carried on in a different manner, and there is something insufferably tedious in the usual process of a meeting. It would surely be much more rational if conversation instead of dancing made the order of the day." "Much more rational, my dear Caroline, I would say, but it would not be so much like a ball." Miss Bingley made no answer, and soon afterward she got up and walked about the room. Her figure was elegant, and she walked well, but Darcy, at whom he was all aimed, was still inflexibly studious. In the desperation of her feelings, she resolved on one effort more, and turning to Elizabeth, said, "Miss Eliza Bennet, let me persuade you to follow my example, and take a turn about the room. I assure you it is very refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude." Elizabeth was surprised, but agreed to it immediately. Miss Bingley succeeded no less in the real object of her civility. Mr. Darcy looked up. He was as much awake to the novelty of attention in the quarter as Miss Elizabeth herself could be, and unconsciously closed his book. He was directly invited to join a party, but he decided it, observing that he could imagine but two motives for their choosing to walk up and down the room together, with either of which motives his joining them would interfere. What could he mean? She was dying to know what could be his meaning, and after Elizabeth, whether she could all understand him? Not at all, was her answer. But depend on it, he means to be severe on us, and our surest way of disappointing him will be to ask nothing about it. Miss Bingley, however, was incapable of disappointing Mr. Darcy in anything, and persevered, therefore, in requiring an explanation of his two motives. I shall not have the smallest objection in explaining them, said he, as soon as he allowed him to speak. You either choose this method of passing the evening because you are in each other's confidence and have secret affairs to discuss, or because you are conscious that your figures appear to be the greatest advantage in walking. If the first, I should be completely in your way, and if the second, I could admire you much better if I sit by the fire. Oh, shocking! Cried Miss Bingley. I never heard anything so abominable. How shall we punish him for such a speech? Nothing so easy, if you have but the inclination, said Elizabeth. We can all plague and punish one another, tease him, laugh at him. Intimate as you are, you must know how it is to be done. But upon my honor, I do not. I do assure you that my intimacy has not yet taught me that. Tease calmness of temper and presence of mind. No, no. I feel he may defy us there. And as to laughter, we will not expose ourselves, if you please, by attempting to laugh without a subject. Mr. Darcy may hug himself. Mr. Darcy is not to be laughed at, cried Elizabeth. That is an uncommon advantage, and uncommon I hope it will continue, for it would be a great loss to me to have many such acquaintance. I dearly love a laugh. Miss Bingley, said he, has given me credit for more than can be. The wisest and best of men, nay, the wisest and best of their actions, may be rendered ridiculous by a person whose first object in life is a joke. Certainly, replied Elizabeth. There are such people, and I hope I am not one of them. I hope I never ridicule what is wise or good. Follies and nonsense, whims and incontinencies do divert me, I own, and I laugh at them whenever I can. But these, I suppose, are precisely what you are without. Perhaps that is not possible for anyone, but it had been the study of my life to avoid such weakness which often expose a strong understanding to ridicule. Such as vanity and pride. Yes, vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is a great superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation. Elizabeth turned away to hide a smile. Your examination of Mr. Darcy is over, I presume, Miss Bingley, and pray what is the result? I am perfectly convinced by it that Mr. Darcy has no defect. He owns it himself without disguise. No, said Darcy, I have made no such pretension. I have faults enough, but they are not, I hope, of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for. It is, I believe, too little yielding, certainly too little for the convenience of the world. I cannot forget the follies and vices of others so soon as I ought, nor the offenses against myself. My feelings are not puffed about with every attempt to move them. My temper would perhaps be called resentful. A good opinion once lost is lost forever. That is a failing indeed, cried Elizabeth. Implacable resentment is a shade in a character, but if you have chosen your fault well, I really cannot laugh at it. You are safe from me. There is, I believe, in every disposition a tendency to some particular evil, a natural defect, which not even the best education can overcome. And your defect is a propensity to hate everybody. And yours, he replied with a smile, is willfully to understand them. Do not let us have a little music, cried Miss Bingley, tired of a conversation of which she had no share. Louisa, you will not mind my walking, Mr. Hurst? Her sister made not the smallest objection, and the pianoforte was opened, and Darcy, after a few moments' recollection, was not sorry for it. He began to feel the danger of paying Elizabeth too much attention. Okay. All right. I am going to take a 5-minute break, and I will be right back. See you in 5 minutes. hello. Back by popular demand. It's me. Shall we continue? I think we shall. We are still on volume 1, chapter 12 of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Let us continue. Chapter 12. In consequence of an argument between the sisters, Elizabeth wrote the next morning to her mother to beg that the carriage might be sent for them in the course of the day. But Mr. Bennet, who had calculated on her daughters remaining at Netherfield till the following Tuesday, which would exactly finish Jane's week, could not bring herself to receive them with pleasure before. Her answer, therefore, was not propitious, at least not to Elizabeth's wishes, for she was impatient to get home. Mr. Bennet sent them word that they could not possibly have the carriage before Tuesday, and in her postscript it was added that if Mr. Bingley and his sister pressed them to stay longer, she could spare them very well. Against staying longer, however, Elizabeth was positively resolved, nor did she much expect it would be asked, and fearful, on the contrary, as being considered intruding themselves needlessly long, she urged Jane to borrow Mr. Bingley's carriage immediately, and at length it was settled that their original design of leaving Netherfield that morning should be mentioned by the request made. The communication excited many professions of concern, and enough was said of wishing them to stay at least till the following day to work on Jane, and till the morrow their going was deferred. Miss Bingley was then sorry that she had proposed a delay, for her jealousy and dislike of one sister much exceeded her affection for the other. The master of the house heard with real sorrow that they were to go soon, and repeatedly tried to persuade Miss Bennet that it would not be safe for her, that she was not enough recovered, but Jane was firm, where she might herself to be right. To Mr. Darcy it was welcome intelligence. Elizabeth had not been at Netherfield long enough. She attracted him more than he liked, and Miss Bingley was uncivil to her, and more teasing than usual to himself. He wisely resolved to be particularly careful that no sign of admiration should now escape him, nothing that could elevate her with the hope of influencing his felicity, sensible that if such an idea had been suggested, his behavior during the last day must have material weight in confirming or crushing it. Steady to his purpose, he scarcely spoke 10 words to her through the whole Saturday, and though they were at one time led by themselves for half an hour, he adhered most conscientiously to his book, and would not even look at her. On Sunday, after morning service, a separation, so agreeable to almost all, took place. Miss Bingley's civility to Elizabeth increased at last very rapidly, as well as her affection for Jane, and when they parted, after assuring the latter of the pleasure it would always give her to see her either at Longbourn or Netherfield, and embracing her most tenderly, she even shook hands with the former. Elizabeth took lead of the whole party in the liveliest spirits. They were not welcomed home very cordially by their mother. Miss Bennet wondered at their coming, and thought them very wrong to give so much trouble, and was sure Jane would have caught cold again. But their father, though very laconic in his expressions of pleasure, was really glad to see them. He had felt their importance in the family circle. The evening conversation, when they were all assembled, had lost much of his animation and almost all its sense by the absence of Jane and Elizabeth. They found Mary, as usual, deep in the study of thorough base and human nature, and thorough bass and human nature, and had some extracts to admire, and though new observations of threadbare morality to listen to. Catherine and Lydia had information for them of a different sort. Much had been done, and much had been said in the regalement since the preceding Wednesday. Several of the officers had dined lately with their uncle. A private had been flogged, and it had actually been hinted that Colonel Forrester was going to be married. "I hope, my dear," said Mr. Bennet to his wife, "that there were at breakfast the next morning, that you had ordered a good dinner today, because I have reason to expect an addition to our family party." "What do you mean, my dear? I know of nobody that is coming, I am sure, unless Charlotte Lucas should happen to call in, and I hope my dinners are good enough for her. I do not believe that she often sees such at home. The person of whom I speak is a gentleman and a stranger." Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled. "A gentleman and a stranger! It is Mr. Bingley, I am sure. Why, Jane, you never dropped a word of this, you sly thing. Well, I am sure I should be extremely glad to see Mr. Bingley, but, good Lord, how unlucky! There's not a bit of fish he got to-day. Lydia, my love, ring the bell. I must speak to Hill this moment." "It is not Mr. Bingley," said her husband. "It is a person whom I never saw in the whole course of my life." Hello, hi, welcome. Pride and Prejudice is the size of a dictionary because it's actually 5 Jane Austen books in one. This is Pride and Prejudice is just 200 pages of this, but it is Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Persuasion all in one. So, yes. To answer your question. Or Maui. But yes, welcome to the stream. I thought humanity shrank. Yeah, honestly. Um, I mean, it could just be huge print. But actually, no, the print is so tiny, which is why it's like, I feel like I get it, keep just bringing it closer and closer to my face. But yeah, Um, welcome to the stream. I do read alouds of books. Right now I'm working on Pride and Prejudice, but I do books and I also do poetry streams once a month. And I do picture book reading streams about once a month. And I also do productivity and co-working streams as often as I can. So yeah, welcome. Huge, as our illustrious supreme ruler often says. I wouldn't necessarily call him such kind words, but yes, huge. Um I actually feel like I don't. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, maybe I don't actually know the proper definition of the word illustrious. I use illustrious. Oh my gosh, another word. Pejorat pejoratively. What is the dictionary definition of illustrious? I'll admit when I don't know a word. I've heard it many, many a time. Well known, respected, and admired. Yeah, I don't know if I would use that, Chief. Okay, new word. What's the other word that you said? Pejoratively. Contempt or disapproval. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. Good. Um, yeah, I can't with that. Anyway, how's your day going? Something I do with people in the chat is throw in the chat your high, your low, and your kudos. So tell me the high of your day, one good thing that happened today, the low of your day, something that might have bothered you today, and then give kudos to one person from your day, if you can remember. High, pot? Question mark. Low, Jack Daniels. I may have crossed my definitions. Oh my God. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way to define high and low, an upper and a downer, if you must. Um, I'll give my high-low kudos first. No. So, okay, the high of my day so far, um, I had a nice time. I had a great morning. I was able to go for a run, and then I sat down at my desk and was like actually productive. Like so many mornings I sit down at my desk and like don't actually get anything done, but this morning I actually did. I was able to write a little bit, which was really nice. My low was um mm, I don't know. I don't have anything like particularly that sticks out to me as low. I think I had like one kind of awkward encounter with a coworker today, so maybe that's my low, but honestly, that was fine. And then kudos to mm, kudos to Olivia Dean, the musician, because I was listening to her today and I really like her music. So kudos to Olivia Dean. Give kudos to commerce and whoever is the dominant winning party in the closest organization relative to my location. Okay, sure. Kissassery. Okay, sure. Love that for you. Okay. Um, this roused a general astonishment, and he had the pleasure of being eagerly questioned by his wife and 5 daughters at once. After amusing himself some time with their curiosity, he thus explained: "About a month ago, I received this letter, and about a fortnight ago I answered it, for I thought it was a case of some delicacy and requiring early attention. It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases." "Oh, my dear," cried his wife, "I cannot bear to hear that mentioned. Pray do not talk with that odious man. I do think that it is the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be entailed away from your own children, and I am sure, if I had been you, I should have tried long ago to do something to other about it." Jane and Elizabeth attempted to explain to her the nature of an entail. They had often attempted it before, but it was a subject on which Mrs. Bennet was beyond the reach of reason, and she continued to rail bitterly against the cruelty of settling an estate away from a family of 5 daughters, in favor of a man whom nobody cared anything about. "It is certainly of a most iniquitous affair," said Mr. Bennet, "and nothing can clear Mr. Collins of the guilt of inheriting Longbourn. But if you will listen to this letter, you may perhaps be a little softened by his manner of expressing himself." "No, that I am sure I shall not. I think it very impertinent of him to write to you at all, and very hypocritical. I hate such false friends. Why could he not keep on quarreling at you, as his father did before him? Why, indeed, did he have so much of some filial scruples in his head, as you will hear?" "Hunsford, near Westerham, Kent, 15th October. "Dear Sir, the disagreement subsiding between yourself and my late honored father always gave me such uneasiness, and since I have had the misfortune to lose him, I have frequently wished to heal the breach, but for some time I was kept back by my own doubts, fearing lest it might seem disrespectful to his memory for me to be on good terms with anyone with whom it had always pleased him to be at variance. There, Mrs. Bennet. His mind, however, is now made up on the subject, for having received ordination at Easter, I have been so fortunate as to be distinguished by my patronage of the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Brow, widow of Sir Louis de Brow, whose bounty and beneficence has preferred me to the valuable rectory of his parish, which it still be my earnest endeavour to demean myself with grateful respect toward her ladyship, and be ever ready to perform those rites and ceremonies which are instituted by the Church of England. As a clergyman, moreover, I feel it my duty to promote and establish the blessing of peace in all families within the reach of my influence, and on these grounds I flatter myself that my present overtures of goodwill are highly commendable, and that the circumstance of my being next in the entail of Longbourn estate will be kindly overlooked on your side, and not lead you to reject the offered olive branch. I cannot be otherwise than concerned as being the means of injuring your amiable daughters, and beg leave the apologies for it, as well as to assure you of my readiness to make them every possible amends, but of this hereafter. If you should have no objection to receive me into your house, I propose myself the satisfaction of waiting on you and your family Monday, November 18th by 4 o'clock, and I shall probably trespass on your hospitality till the Saturday se'nnight following, which I can do without any inconvenience, as Lady Catherine is far from objecting to my occasional absence on a Sunday, provided that some other clergyman is engaged to do the duty of the day. I remain, dear sir, with respectful compliments to your lady and daughters, your well-wisher and friend, William Collins. At 4 o'clock, therefore, we may expect this peacemaking gentleman, said Mr. Bennet, as he folded up the letter. He seems to be a most contentious and polite young man, upon my word, and I doubt not will prove a valuable acquaintance, especially if Lady Catherine should be so indulgent as to let him come to us again. There is some sense in what he says about the girls, however, if he is disposed to make them any amends, I shall not be the person to discourage him. Though it is difficult, said Jane, to guess in what way he can mean to make the atonement he thinks our due, the wish is certainly to his credit. Elizabeth was chiefly struck with his extraordinary defence of Lady Catherine, and his kind intention of christening, marrying, and burying his parishioners, whether it was required. He may be an oddity, I think, said she. I cannot make him out. There is something very pompous in his style, and what can he mean by apologizing for being next in the entail? You cannot suppose he would help it, if he could. Can he be a sensible man, sir? No, my dear, I think not. I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse. There is a mixture of servility and self-importance in his letter, which promises well. I am impatient to see him. In point of composition, said Mary, his letter does not seem defective. The idea of the olive branch perhaps is not wholly new, yet I think it is well expressed. To Catherine and Lydia, neither the letter nor its writer were in any degree interesting. It was next to impossible that their cousin should come in a scarlet coat, and it was now some weeks since they had received pleasure of the society of a man in any other color. As for their mother, Mr. Collins's letter had done away much of her ill will, and she was preparing to see him with a degree of composure. Which astonishment her husband and daughters. Mr. Collins was punctual to his time, and was received with great politeness by the whole family. Mr. Bennet, indeed, said little, but the ladies were ready enough to talk, and Mr. Collins seemed neither in need of encouragement nor inclined to be silent himself. He was a tall, heavy-looking young man of 25. His air was grave and stately, and his manner was very formal. He had been long seated before he complimented Mrs. Bennet on having so fine a family of daughters, said he had heard much of their beauty, but that, in this instance, fame had fallen short of the truth, and added that he did not doubt her seeing them all in due time well disposed of in marriage. This gallantry was not much to the taste of some of his hearers, but Mrs. Bennet, who quarrelled with no compliments, answered most readily. You are very kind, sir, I am sure. I wish with all my heart if it proves so, for else they will be destitute enough. Things are settled so oddly. You allure, perhaps, to the entail of this estate? Ah, sir, I do indeed. It is a grievous affair to my poor girls, you must confess. Not that I mean to find fault with you, for such things I know are all chance of this world. There is no knowing how estates will go when once they have been so entailed. I am very sensible, madam, of the hardships to my fair cousins, and could say much on the subject, but that I am cautious of appearing forward and precipitate. But I can assure the young ladies that I come prepared to admire them. At present I will not say more, but perhaps when we are better acquainted. he was interrupted by a summons to dinner, and the girls smiled at each other. They were not the only objects of Mr. Collins' admiration. The hall, the dining room, and all its furniture were examined and praised, and his commendation of everything would have touched Mrs. Bennet's heart, but for the mortifying suspicion of his viewing of it all his own future property. The dinner, too, in its turn, was highly admired, and he begged to know of which of his fair cousins the excellence of its cookery was owing. But here he was set right by Miss Bennet, who assured him with some asperity that they were very well able to keep a good cook, and that her daughters had nothing to do in the kitchen. He begged pardon for having displeased her. In a softened tone, she declared herself not at all offended, but he continued to apologize for about a quarter of an hour. He's a funny character. Okay, I'm going to read one more chapter, I think, and then I'm going to call it a night. Okay, chapter 14. During dinner, Mr. Bennet scarcely spoke at all. But when the servants were withdrawn, he thought it time to have some conversation with his guest, and therefore started a subject in which he expected him to shine, by observing that he seemed very fortunate in his patroness. Lady Catherine de Bourgh's attention to his wishes and consideration for his comfort appeared very remarkable. Mr. Bennet could not have chosen better. Mr. Collins was eloquent in her praise. The subject elevated him to more than usual solemnity of matter, and with a most important aspect he protested that he had never in his life witnessed such behavior in a person of rank, such affability and condensate, condensate, wait, condensation, whatever, as he himself experienced from Lady Catherine. She had been grievously pleased to approve of both discourses, which he had already had the honor of preaching before her. He had also asked him twice to dine at Rosings, and had sent for him only the Saturday before, to make up her pool of quadrille in the evening. Lady Catherine had reckoned proud by many people he knew, but he had never seen anything but affability in her. She had always spoken to him as she would to any other gentleman. She made not the smallest objection to his joining in the society of the neighborhood, nor to the leaving his parish occasionally for a week or two to visit his relations. She had even condescended to advise him to marry as soon as he could, provided he chose with discretion, and had once paid him a visit to his humble parsonage, where she had perfectly approved all of the alterations he had been making, and had even vouchsafed to suggest some herself, some shelves and closets upstairs. "That is all very proper and civil, I am sure," said Mrs. Bennet. "I dare say she is a very agreeable woman. It is a pity that great ladies in general are not more like her. Does she live near you, sir?" "The garden, in which stands my humble abode, is separated only by a lane from Rosings Park, her ladyship's residence." "I think you said she was a widow, sir? Has she any family?" "She has one only daughter, the heiress of Rosings, and of very extensive property." "Ah!" cried Mrs. Bennet, shaking her head, "then she is better off than many girls. And what sort of young lady is she? Is she handsome?" "She is a most charming young lady indeed. Lady Catherine herself says that in point of true beauty, Miss de Bourgh is far superior to the handsomeness of her sex, because there is that in her features which marks the young woman of distinguished birth. She is unfortunately of a sickly constitution which has prevented her making that progress in many accomplishments which she could not otherwise have failed of, as I am informed by the lady who superintended her education, but who still resides with them. But she is perfectly amiable, and often condescends to drive by my humble abode in her little phaeton and ponies. Has she been presented? I do not remember her name among the ladies at court. Her indifferent state of health unhappily prevents her being in town, and by that means, I am told Lady Catherine myself one day has deprived the British court of its brightest ornament. Her ladyship seemed pleased by the idea, and you may imagine that I am happy on the occasion to offer those little delicate compliments that are always acceptable to ladies. I have more than once observed to Lady Catherine that her charming daughter seemed born to be a duchess, and that the most elevated rank, instead of giving her consequence, would be adorned by her. These are the kind of little things which please her ladyship, and it is sort of attention that I conceive myself particularly bound to pay. You judge very properly, said Mr. Bennet, and it is happy for you that you possess the talent of flattering with delicacy. May I ask whether these pleasing attentions proceed from the impulse of the moment, or are the result of previous study? They arise chiefly from what is passing at the time, and though I sometimes amuse myself with suggesting and arraying such little elegant compliments as may be adapted to ordinary occasions, I always wish to give them an unstudied air as possible. Mr. Bennet's expectations were fully answered. His cousin was as absurd as he had hoped, and he listened to him with the keenest enjoyment, maintaining at the same time the most resolute composure and countenance, and except in the occasional glance at Elizabeth, requiring no partner in his pleasure. By tea time, however, the dose had been enough, and Mr. Bennet was glad to take his guest into the drawing room again, and when tea was over, glad to invite him to read aloud to the ladies. Mr. Collins readily assented, and a book was produced, but on beholding it, for everything announced it to be from a circulating library, he startled back, and begging pardon, protested that he never read novels. Kitty stared at him, and Lydia exclaimed. Other books were produced, and after some deliberation he chose Fordyce's Sermons. Lydia gaped as he opened the volume, and before he had a very monotonous solemnity read 3 pages, she interrupted him with, "Do you know, Mamma, that my Uncle Phillips talks of turning away Richard? And if he does, Colonel Forrester will fire him. My aunt told me so herself on Saturday. I shall walk to Meryton tomorrow to hear more about it, and to ask whether Mr. Denny comes back from town." Lydia was bid by her 2 eldest sisters to hold her tongue, but Mr. Collins, much offended, laid aside his book, and said, "I have often observed how little young ladies are interested by books of a serious stamp, though written solely for their benefit. It amazes me, I confess. For certainty, there can be nothing so advantageous to them as instruction, but I will no longer importune my young cousin." Then, turning to Mr. Bennet, he offered himself as his antagonist at backgammon. Mr. Bennet accepted this challenge, observing that he acted very wisely in leaving the girls to their own trifling amusements. Mrs. Bennet and her daughters apologized most civilly for Lydia's interruption, and promised that it should not occur again, and he would resume his book. But Mr. Collins, after assuring them that he bore his young cousin no ill will, and should never resent her behaviour in any affront, seated himself at another table with Mr. Bennet, and prepared for backgammon. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So we made it through chapter 14. And yeah, thank you as always for listening. I hope you enjoyed those chapters. And I will be back next Thursday for the next few chapters of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I hope you have a lovely night, and I will see you very soon. Bye.